Hello everyone, I am Rupkini Ranjan Bhattacharjee, a civil servant from the state of West Bengal. This is my YouTube channel. As you have already noticed that I have uploaded videos on my Bengali poetries as well as my journey through Bhagavad Gita. Apart from these things, I am very interested in different subjects that I have come across in my preparation phase. Though I am an engineering graduate, but subjects like economics, polity, history, geography, environment, international relations are very interesting to me. So in due course, I will be uploading several a series of videos covering all aspects of different subjects. Today, I will take an introductory class on economics. Now, this introductory class will have several parts as economics is a vast subject. I will be covering every aspects of it that is required with respect to the different competitive examinations, whether it is national level as well as subnational level. So stay tuned. Let's start. Now, start with the basic terms of economics. Here we have two terms, economics, and second one is economy. There is basic difference between these two terms. First is economics. It is nothing but theory. It is nothing but the policies that is made in order to solve different problems and challenges. So we have certain strategies. These are the strategies. So this is nothing but a bookish idea. That is economics. But when I'm talking about the economy, so when this idea is executed on field, so we have the practical part, or after implementing different policies, ideas, theories, equations, the ultimate outcome is the structure of a certain land. So that structure is termed as the economy. So economics is a theory, and based on the execution of the theory, what we practice, that is economic. So we must have a clear-cut idea, the difference between these two words. So economics is a theory. It is a set of rules, policies that is made. So why those policies are made? In order to solve certain challenges. The next few minutes will get a clear-cut idea about what kind of challenges that we face in our economic life or in economic decision taking. And then when these theories or the policies or the ideas executed, then ultimate outcome or the practice, and based on the practice, we can have a certain structure. That is the economy. So economics is a subject. So economics is a subject, and economy is the outcome. Is the outcome, or is the structure. And in the definition of economics, in the definition of the term economics, here we have two key words. We have two key words. One is scarcity, and the second one is scarcity, and the second one is efficiency. So whenever we try to define the term economics, we must use these two words. One is scarcity and second one is efficiency. Now, why these two words are used? So economics is nothing but a strategy, nothing but a policy, it's nothing but an idea. Okay. It's nothing but a theory. So why these things are used, like theory, strategy, policy, idea? to solve certain problems. As I said, here resources is limited. In our earth, resources are limited, be it oil and natural gas, be it coal. Apart from that, we can have other metallic as well as non-metallic resources. All those resources are in a quantifiable, in a fixed, in a limited amount. So resources are limited, and there is people. And people's demand is infinite. So we have a certain theory. We must have a certain strategy. We must have a certain policy. We must have a certain idea in order to fulfill this infinite people's demand by using this limited resource efficiently. So where we can have scarcity, in resources we have scarcity. In resources we have scarcity. So in resources we have scarcity. And in using these policies to fulfill the infinite demands, we must have efficiency. Efficiency. So these two ideas. So resources are scarce. And not to fulfill the infinite demand of the people, we must use the limited resources to develop certain theories, strategies, policies, and idea efficiently so that we can satisfy it, the infinite demand. We cannot fully satisfy, but we must try to satisfy. That's the basic definition of economics. Now come to the definition of economy. Here, economy, as I said, economy is nothing but an economic structure of a land. That land may be a country, land may be a nation, that land may be a certain state or subnation. That land may be an organization. That land may be a family. So these organizations, families, etc., we have certain economic structure. That's the economy. The economy of the family, the economy of the organization, the economy of the state, the economy of nation, country, etc. Now, in that structure, we have four pillars. So in that structure, we have four pillars. First one is production. First one is production. Second is distribution. Third one is exchange. And the fourth one is consumption. Consumption. So in a certain land, in a certain organization, if these four things is happening simultaneously, then that's the economy. So in an economy, we have these four things is happening simultaneously: production, distribution, exchange, and consumption. Now, what are the stakeholders of these things? Is we'll look into it. First, come to the production. In production, what we have? What are the stakeholders of production? In production, what we have? We need similarly, we need four different pillars. One is land, second is labor, third one is capital, and the fourth one is organization. These four things are needed in order to start a production. Self-sufficient production. We need these things. A land where a certain industry must be built. Laborers, so workers must be there to run that particular industry. Capital is needed to run it smoothly to satisfy the demand of the raw materials as well as other intermediary items and products. And the last one is to take decisions in which way it should be done. That's the organization. So land is driven by what? So what is the fundamental or provoking item that drives these things? So land is driven by rent. As there is the existence of rent, you can have the availability of land. In basic concepts, we have other absolute concepts. I'm not looking into it. Just remember that the rent is the driving force of the land. Second, there is wage. Wage is the driving force of labor. Interest. Interest is the driving force for capital. And profit is the driving force for organization. If you start an industry, if you do not get profit, then you will start. Will you start an organization? Definitely not. So these are the driving forces of these four items that ultimately contribute to the production. Now distribution is like rent plus wage plus interest plus profit. So these four things is distributed among the different factors of production. These factors are also called inputs. So distribution of rent is there to the land, distribution of wage is there to the labor, distribution of interest is there to the capital provider, and the distribution of profit is to the organization. So that is the distribution. And then we can have exchange. Exchange of the foods are there from, say for an example, from different parts, A part to the B part. If that person is seller, if it is that consumer. So exchange must be there. Monetary as well as product, as well as factor. So these things are exchanged in product market. So we have two kinds of market. We have two kinds of market. One is product market. I will look into it in later times. Product market, and then there is factor market. In every market, we can have exchange, whether it is of the product, of the factors based on certain common item that is called currency, or etc. I will look into it. So that's the exchange. And the last item is the consumption. Consumption. And this consumption is done by the consumers or the buyers. So these four items are needed in order to run production. Apart from that, to run an economy, we need production, distribution, exchange, and consumption. Now come to the basic problems of the economy. Economy has two problems or challenges. Challenges of an economy. So economy has two challenges. The first one is availability of goods and services. So goods and services must be available in the market. So we should make sure the availability of goods and services. The first one. And the second is when these goods and services are available in the market, the next thing is that we must have a good supply network to reach it to the definite consumers. So these two items. Now, in the availability, now in the come to the first one, this is the availability of goods and services. Here we have three basic questions, like what to produce, then how to produce, and for whom to produce. So these three basic questions are attached to the availability of goods and services in an economy. First come to the what. In what Like, say for an example, in India, the policymakers, how the policymakers decide decide that in India, wheat, rice, guns, butter, missiles, in which quantity these things will be produced in a certain financial year. How the policymakers decide, like what to produce. Is it wheat? Is it rice? Is it gun? Is it butter or missiles? Now, you must have certain facts or data. Like in India, it is based on economic survey in 2016-17, I guess. Like agricultural product, agri product, not product, just raw items, like cereals. The cereals, since 2013-14, the production of it is almost same or slight, slightly decreased. Okay, total amount of the cereals since 2013-14, the amount of the cereals produced in India is slightly decreased. Whereas for the passenger cars, it is almost stagnant. And for commercial vehicles as well as three wheelers, it is rapidly increased. So we have a scenario where agri production of a certain item is slightly decreased. The production of passenger cars almost stagnant, whereas the commercial vehicles as well as three wheelers rapidly increased. So these decisions were taken by some policymakers what to produce. That's the idea. Second is how to produce, like what should be the process. Okay, what should be the intermediary steps, what should be the path to produce certain thing. Like for that we must have a certain data. Like in 19 since 1980s, here hydropower, dependence on hydropower rapidly declined. To produce certain items industrially, we need certain power or energy, where the dependence on hydro energy since 1980s in India rapidly declined. Whereas in thermal power, that increased rapidly. Though we have certain problems with this thermal aspect based on the environmental degradation and other impacts, adverse impacts on the society. So apart from that, even that's happening, but this is a reality. Like the dependence on thermal power that is rapidly increased since 1980s, and to the nuclear power it is more or less same or slightly increasing. So this is the idea, like in which way we must use the energy in order to get the final product. That's the how. And the last is very important, like for whom we should target whenever we, say for an example, manufacture Audi or manufacture a Suzuki car or a TVS bike, etc. So the target audience is different. So for whom? Here we must find out people's purchasing power. So based on people's purchasing power, this for whom is decided. Now purchasing power is defined with respect to income. So we must find out the income of general public or the target audience. Now here For that, there is very interesting parameter. It is Gini coefficient that measures income inequality, that measures wealth distribution inequality, etc. So for India, this Gini coefficient is based on 2003-4 data. It is 0.23, 0.325. The lower the value, the higher or the beneficial or the good the society, more good or better the society. For Gini coefficient, we have a certain curve. Say, for an example, is the percentage of population and there is the percentage of national income of a certain economy. So this is, say, for an example, 20% of the population has, say, for an example, a certain aspects has 20% of national income. So this is the ideal stage. 100% of the population has 100% of the national income. So this was the ideal stages. So ideally, this graph must be a linear, but actually we cannot have a linear form. Rather, we have an inclined aspect. So this is called Lorenz curve. It defines income inequality or inequality in wealth distribution. The greater this shadowed area, the worse the economy is, or the worse the distribution of income is. Now I will look into this Lorenz curve in later period. Here the idea is whenever we try to find out for whom we must produce, we look into purchasing power, we look into income, we look into the wealth, we look into the distribution of these three things: income distribution, purchasing power distribution, etc. Based on that, audience are targeted, regions are targeted, peoples are targeted, as well as region is targeted. Say for an example, by BMW makers, they will target such audience or such region which has higher income graph or income footprints. So that's the idea of for whom production must be made. Now, based on the two problems like availability and second is supply network, throughout the history, we can have the emergence of three models to satisfy or to fulfill the challenges, these two challenges. We have three models. First one is market model, or it is termed as market economy. Second is state economy, and third one is mixed of both one and two. So these three basic models emerged through trial and error method in order to fulfill, in order to answer the problems of the economic challenges. The first one is the market economy. Here we all know that the idea of market economy started in the year of 1776. That's the year of independence of United States. There was a person called Adam Smith, an economist, who put forward a book that is Wealth of Nations. In his book, he propounded an idea that market can handle everything. So we can basically have two or three items. One is laissez-faire or less intervention, or grammatically it is to allow. Second, we can have division of labor. And the third we can have this invisible hands of market forces. So these three items must. Laissez-faire means, according to Adam Smith, less intervention should be made by the government in economic sphere. Like government should allow the businessmen and the people to think, to decide for themselves. That is the laissez-faire. Division of labor was there. Like this division of labor is very important. That ultimately put forward the idea of specialization. Like some people who are very much good in certain craft, so they must be allowed to do that craft, so that we can have some good finest finishings as well as the fine final product. Say for an example, the recent controversy of Kolhapur chappal. So we cannot have that kind of chappal everywhere in India. So that is the finest, a great craftsmanship. So this is called specialization. So that has come due to this division of labor. And the last is invisible hands of market force. So whenever price goes down, whenever demand falls, whenever supply ups, in every situation, market is there. Market knows everything, and it will ultimately reach to the equilibrium. That was the idea. But ultimately, we will notice that it is not always true. This invisible hand does make a certain market equilibrium, but that equilibrium comes by giving certain adverse impact to a certain section of the society. So it is not always good or always beneficial for all sections to look into. Next is the state economy. Full control of the state is there to the resources, the process of the production, the supply network, and etc. So all these things is controlled by the state. This is the command economy. It was started in 19th century. The idea was there by Karl Marx. And later on in 1917, it was followed by USSR after Bolshevik Revolution in 1917. And later on, it was used by 1949 by China. So these are the general chronological appearance of state economy. But there was a certain crash happened in 1930s, where basically the Western nations, were very much dependent on the market. It crashed. Actually, USA's stock market crashed. Banking system crashed. As well as in agricultural area, there was a huge drought. So these things is, apart from that, international trade also shrunk due to the protectionist policies by different nations. So as a part of these four or five things, several things, there was the occurrence of Great Depression in 1930s. Now to recover those nations, Western nations mainly, a famous economist, John A. Keynes, he put forward an idea through his book in 1936. That is the general theory of employment, interest, and money. General theory of employment, interest, and money. He put forward the idea of social sector. He put forward the idea of social sector and welfare state. In social sector, government deals with certain goods, and those goods are termed as public goods. Nowadays, we know that What are the public goods like education, health, water, etc. So government must spend huge amount to the public goods in order to recover the, the lower sections or the badly affected section of the society of an economy that is got impacted by the market forces and to take care of there must be the emergence of welfare state. Welfare state means welfare state means when in a state the economic decision of people, economic aspects of the people is decided by market and the social security and other things is decided by the government. So here you can have the existence of both market as well as government. Both play a crucial role in welfare state. Now it is very surprising that after 1930s or after 2 decades or 20 years, more than 50% of the government expenditure in both Europe as well as in America that went to invest in public sector, in public goods or in social sector. That's very interesting. So most of the nations accepted the theory of J.M. Keynes. J.M. Keynes theory is nothing but state and interventionist state. State must intervention to the economy to make the economy beneficial for all sections. But the catch is the socialist nations that followed the state economy, they still at that time they did not basically agreed on the idea that they must develop certain market features. So they completely denied. A very important aspect is market socialism. So this idea was given by Oscar, OSCA, Oscar Lange. Oscar Lange. He put forward the idea of market socialism for state economies. That state economies must open its economic sphere up to certain extent to make them more beneficial. But ultimately, Oscar Lange, Oscar Lange's idea was accepted by China in 1985 when they for the first time announced open door policy. So China, a state economy that for the first time opened its economy. And in case of India's economy, if we look into it, after independence, Indian economy was mixed economy. So when, as I said, both the market economy as well as state economy failed. So nowadays, in today's world, every nation, every organization, be it World Bank or IMF, everyone basically follows the existence of both private sector as well as public sector or the idea of mixed economies. So in case of India, this mixed economy, after independence, we accepted this mixed economy as well as in 1991. So we have two ideas, two stages, two phases. One is pre 1991 and then we can have post 1991. In both the phases, India had mixed economy, but certain modified. So certain modification was made. So modified mixed economy. So mixed economy was there after independence, as well as in post 1991. As I said, in 1991 there was the occurrence of LPG, liberalization, privatization, and globalization. We'll look into it in later lectures. Just remember it, Indian economy after independence, it was always mixed, whether it is before 1991 as well as post 1991. Only the nature of that mixed economy changed. Okay. Now, in case of economics, come to the idea of fallacy. fallacy or common mistakes that we encounter in economic theories. There are three types of fallacies. First one is post hoc fallacy. Say, for an example, in July in India, a certain economic catastrophic thing A, say for an example, A happened, and in August, same in India, B happened. So you cannot say that A is the reason for B. So we must be very cautious about this periodic happening incidents. You cannot say that the previous one is the reason for that the next one is happening. So we must be cautious of it. That is the post hoc fallacy. Next is failure to hold or consider a thing or things constant is very important. Say, for an example, whenever we are dealing with a certain demand graph, say, for an example, this is the price and this is the demand. So we have a certain curve in case of price and demand. So here, whenever we are talking about two variables, so all other variables must be constant. So we should consider it. If we do not consider other variables constant, then the outcome of these equations or relationships will be full of flaws. And the third one is very important. It is the fallacy of composition. Composition is very interesting thing. Like what is true to the 1%, that is true to the all person in accumulation. So that may not be true. That can never be true. We must know that one. Like say for an example, doctor tells you to eat an apple, to eat an apple a day, per day an apple. Now we think that an apple has certain beneficial qualities. So you take three apples per day. So do you think that if you get 10% of energy after taking one apple, so is it true that if you take three apples, you will get 30% of energy? It may be true, may not be true. So you must be cautious of it. What is true to the particular individual person cannot be true to the whole nation or the state or certain groups. So this idea of implementing certain rules and laws at the individual level or the group level, we must have some consciousness. And based on it, there was a person called Ragnar Frisch. He put forward the idea that economics is of two types, micro and macro. So what is true to the microeconomics cannot be true to the macro. So it is individual level perspective and it is group level perspective. Okay. We'll later phase we'll look into the definitions and other aspects of micro and macroeconomics. So this is for the part one of the introductory class of economics. That's it. Goodbye.